All right, we're going to break in with this Fox News alert here. We have just gotten word former President Donald Trump has been indicted by a grand jury in New York. Trump was under investigation by the DA's office for his alleged hush money payment to adult film star Stormy Daniels during the 2016 campaign. So as we await more information, Fox News has just learned this from two law enforcement sources that Trump has been indicted. Perhaps I can go around the table. Katie, I'll start with you first.
Well, the president said 2 weeks ago that this was going to happen eventually. He thought it would happen last Tuesday. The grand jury then did not convene for 2 days in a row. And the grand jury was out of town, allegedly, for a month as of yesterday. So this is quite interesting to hear after they were sent home for the month. Now, leading up to this, there was a lot of talk about whether this would even happen, considering Alvin Bragg, who is the Manhattan district attorney who is looking into bringing these charges, would be able to, just given how long it's been since this incident. And it was allegedly a misdemeanor charge. It's never been happened in the history of the New York Attorney's Office before. And there's been a lot of controversy about whether it was appropriate, given the president is a presidential candidate, again, and whether it was politically motivated as a result of this district attorney not having the authority to bring it. Also, of course, there are big questions about the district attorney's priorities when it comes to his obligations in New York to put hardened criminals who are carrying out very violent crimes in the city behind bars, when now he is focused on President Trump. But here we are with this. The president said it was going to happen. So now there are big questions about how this will go down, whether the president will come to New York to be fingerprinted, to take the charges in person, and what that will look like with Secret Service and NYPD, and whether there will be a mugshot and how that will be handled.
I think that's important to ask at this point, Jesse. We don't exactly know how this will go down, but we do know that the indictment would not be announced until it was stamped. The DA's office would then notify an attorney for the former president that he would then be indicted. At that point, the president is then free to make the information public himself. We are reporting this as we've learned it from two law enforcement officials. We'll see if we hear anything from the former president as the moments go on here. Will he be arrested? Would there be any sort of mugshot taken? Will he appear in court? Those are questions that we do not have answers to at this moment.
It's the stupidest thing I've ever seen. And I feel bad for the guy. He didn't even really have to be president. He had a lot of money. He had a great life. And he decided to run. He won. He got in. They took him down. And now they're trying to nickel and dime him for a private agreement he made with a woman, 8 years ago? It has nothing to do with politics. Wasn't paid through campaign funds. This is a disgrace. And I think it takes about a week to get the logistics in, so he'll come up and he will get fingerprinted, and they'll get a mugshot. And then they'll plaster that mugshot all over the country for the next 2 years and run against a criminal. And that's what this is all about. No one wanted this. Not even the left wanted this. But now I'm thinking Bragg got embarrassed, because everything you heard over the last 48 hours is they were just going to put this to bed and take a break for a month. So I don't know if there's pressure put on him, because his numbers went up in the last couple weeks when this thing swirled. So maybe the left's calculating that indicting this guy is going to get him the nomination, and they think he's easier to beat. But I wouldn't be so sure about that, because there's going to be a major rally around the flag feeling. I'm starting to feel it right now. I'm angry about it. I don't like it. The country's not going to stand for it. And people better be careful. And that's all I'll say about that.
Okay.
This is the third act of the movie, right? It really is. This is how it has to be. This guarantees his nomination. Alvin Bragg is the MAGA Republican of the Year. He just got Trump's nomination. I think if there's a mugshot, which there will be, you got to own it. That's got to be the poster. That's got to be. He is an OG, right? If they give me, I mean, he is a badass. If he's got a mugshot, you might as well go right into it. And the thing is, his poll numbers have gone up with this. I just think this is going to make sure he is going to be on the ticket. And to your point, they made that gamble in 2016. They thought that he would lose to Hillary, and he didn't. So I don't know if they really think that this is good, like the Joy Behar logic, which is like, oh, he'll be easy to beat.
Just one factual point. It's being reported that it's a felony indictment, and I was saying earlier that there was.
Together, we provide nutrients to support an NBC News special report. Here's Lester Holt.
Good day from New York. NBC News has learned a New York grand jury has just voted to indict former President Donald Trump. It's the first indictment ever of a former U.S. president and could have a major impact in the 2024 race for the White House. The investigation centered on Mr. Trump's alleged role in 2016 in a hush money payment to former adult film star Stormy Daniels, who said she had an affair with Mr. Trump in 2006. That payment was made in the final days of the 2016 presidential campaign by Michael Cohen, Mr. Trump's former lawyer, who after the election was reimbursed by the Trump Organization. Joining us now is NBC News senior legal correspondent Laura Jarrett. Laura, lay it out for us.
All right, Lester, obviously a seismic development here, a historic development. Never before have we seen a former president indicted in the United States of America. Now, we have not actually seen this indictment. We believe it to be still under seal there in the court in Manhattan, but we now have 3 sources confirming that the grand jury has, in fact, voted to indict. We also have 2 sources confirming that Mr. Trump's lawyers have been informed that this grand jury has voted to indict. Now, typically, the defendant gets an opportunity to surrender in a case like this. Obviously, Mr. Trump had forecasted that he would be arrested in some respect. We have no evidence that that has taken place. But the typical scenario would be for he to actually surrender at the district attorney's office. At that point, he would be processed, fingerprinted, mugshot, all of the typical processes that you would see in a regular case. Even though, of course, this is not the regular case, we do not have any timing on exactly when that processing would take place.
Now,
Lester.
the indictment itself, will it be sealed? Will we not perhaps see the details of it for some time?
It's typically sealed until a judge actually orders it to be unsealed. So it gets sealed. It's actually with the court right now.
And that would specify what the actual accusation is.
That's exactly. That's when we will actually see the piece of paper that will actually lay out all the charges. Sometimes they go into great detail. That's known as a speaking indictment, when it provides somewhat of a narrative, sort of telling the story of what happened. Sometimes it's very bare bones, and we'll have to wait and see what this one does.
We have been hearing that the legal theory, the legal basis that the DA has been looking at is one that's untested. Yes. What do we know about what the challenge was in this case?
So typically in a case like this, the falsification of business records, that's typically a misdemeanor. So we're talking just up to a year in prison. In order to elevate it, to step it up to a felony, there has to be actually a second crime, an intent to either commit or conceal a second crime. And throughout this entire investigation, we've all wondered, what would that second crime be? Could it be something related to state election law? Could it be something related to federal election law? We just don't know, and it's one of the things that we're going to be looking for when, in fact, this indictment gets unsealed.
So a question that essentially centers on how that money was accounted for, what it was stated to be used for, and what the intent may have been for its use.
Exactly. So it's not actually the paying of the hush money that's the crime. The problematic issue here, if in fact that's what they've indicted him on, is the way that it was accounted for on the books of the Trump Organization as legal fees, when in fact it was not legal fees to Michael Cohen, his lawyer at the time. It was hush money.
Again, if the former president had predicted, a week and a half ago that he would be arrested, obviously that has not happened right now, but we do know, again, from our sources, there has been an indictment. Let me go to senior Capitol Hill correspondent Garrett Haake. Garrett, what can you tell us?
Well, Lester, picking up that timeline from a week and a half ago, after Mr. Trump's prediction a week and a half ago Saturday that he would be arrested the following Tuesday, his legal team offered a witness of their own to this grand jury, a man named Robert Costello, who had been an attorney working with Michael Cohen around the time of this alleged hush money plot. That testimony then essentially was the last moving piece we saw in this probe for another week. On Monday of this week, the grand jury heard from what we now believe was their final witness, David Pecker, the former publisher of the National Enquirer. This was Mr. Pecker's second time before the grand jury. He's a key player in all of this. He was believed to be the person who brought together Mr. Cohen and attorneys for Stormy Daniels, who might have engineered or at least come up with the idea for these payments. That witness on Monday, again, believed to be the last witness this grand jury heard before their decision to indict today, apparently 2 months to the day after being convened for the very first time on January 30th. Now, as we await additional information about what the charges might be. I can tell you the political reaction is already coming in. Congress is headed out on a 2-week recess, but already we've heard from members, and it's clear that this is going to be a polarizing decision, both in the halls of Congress and politically across the nation writ large. One Republican member of Congress calling it a dark day for the country. Some Democrats.
This is a CBS News special report. I'm Norah O'Donnell in Washington, and we are coming on the air with historic news. For the first time ever in American history, a former president of the United States has been indicted. This unprecedented case against Trump will have wide-ranging implications. This indictment, filed under seal by the Manhattan DA, could be announced in the coming days. It would also mean that Donald Trump would be asked to surrender and face arraignment on charges yet to be announced. It is all related to the hush money payment made to former porn star Stormy Daniels. Let's bring in our chief election campaign correspondent, Robert Costa, who broke this news for us here at CBS and has been talking to his sources. What have you learned?
Good to be with you, Nora. This is a historic moment to have a former president indicted. This has been confirmed to CBS News by Trump's own attorney, Susan Nicholas. She has told CBS News the former president has been indicted. This is about hush money payments made in 2016 by his former fixer, Michael Cohen, to Stormy Daniels, the porn star. Under scrutiny is former President Trump's role in this entire operation. They've been talking to witnesses extensively in recent months, focusing especially on Michael Cohen and his testimony about Trump's role in this entire episode. Bob Costello, the former witness, one of the former lawyer for Trump, he has testified in recent weeks about this entire matter. He just told CBS News minutes ago that he will be, if there's a trial, someone who questions Cohen's credibility. So this could be a tough case for the district attorney in Manhattan, Alvin Bragg, to make, but he believes the evidence is there. And sources tell CBS News that Alvin Bragg, the district attorney, is not just relying on Michael Cohen's testimony, that he has been slowly and methodically building a case based on financial documents, personal correspondence, to tell a broader story, not just about Stormy Daniels, but about other so-called catch-and-kill operations to stop stories seen as unsavory from being published during the presidential campaign.
Alvin Bragg, the Manhattan district attorney, will now negotiate with Trump's lawyers to negotiate this surrender. Could that mean that the former president of the United States will be photographed and fingerprinted in the bowels of a New York State courthouse?
Yes, while this is a highly unusual, historic situation, our sources in the Manhattan district attorney's office in operations say that the former president would be brought in like anyone else who was indicted. We will see him surrender to authorities. Exactly how that plays out could be negotiated in terms of whether there's a so-called perp walk or seeing the former president in handcuffs. But he will be fingerprinted regardless of any negotiation, and there will be an arraignment in open court.
The only difference in terms of how other people would be treated, of course, Donald Trump will have his Secret Service in tow. Quite an extraordinary moment just to imagine all of that. We don't know at this hour what the specific charges are, correct?
That's correct. We do not know the scope of this indictment. We do know that the district attorney has been looking into trying to broaden potentially the scope of an indictment. Because in terms of the financial crimes here, if you just expense something on an expense report, that could be a misdemeanor. So what we've seen in recent weeks is the district attorney trying to see if this indictment, if it ever came, now it has come, would be something that would be a collection of misdemeanors that would rise to a felony level. And so you see Trump now, we expect, based on our reporting, he's being indicted at a felony level for financial crimes based on how this payment was made and how it was communicated.
A former president of the United States, for the first time in history, has been indicted, will face criminal charges. We don't know the specifics of those charges, as Robert Costa has just outlined. Already, Trump's attorneys saying this is a mistake on behalf of the prosecutor.
But to be clear, this wasn't just the prosecutor's decision. The way this works is the Manhattan district attorney will come to the grand jury, a group of people who have been listening to all of the evidence and all of the testimony, and he will seek an indictment from them. So this is the grand jury's decision to move forward with an indictment, believing enough evidence is there to indict this person, in this case, a former president of the United States.
I also want to bring in our senior investigative correspondent, Catherine Herridge. She has also been speaking with her sources. Catherine, what have you learned?
About the development with the grand jury in New York. Seemed a little off balance by the question, though he...
Oh, this brother is for real with it. Listen. Method is definitely
falsification of records and potentially whether or not this could have been an elections campaign violation as well. That is somewhat untested, is it not?
That's right, David. So exactly as Aaron just said, this crime of falsifying business records with an intent to defraud, standing alone is a misdemeanor. But if it is done in furtherance of or in an effort to conceal another crime, it is bumped up to a felony, far more serious, longer statute of limitations, longer potential penalties. But of course, the big question is what that other crime could be. A campaign finance crime, as you said, David, this would be somewhat uncharted because there have been no charges against former President Trump for any violation of campaign finance laws. So this would be bootstrapping this state charge potentially to an uncharged federal crime. That's a possibility. But of course, there are other possibilities, maybe a state tax crime that could be the offense that could bump this up from a misdemeanor to a felony. So of course, once the indictment is unsealed, we'll be able to take a look and evaluate what the legal theory really looks like.
Once this indictment is unsealed, and Kate, what's your best guess here as to how long the American people will wait before they hear what the charges are here?
I think it'll happen pretty quickly, Aaron. And of course, the next step would be either a voluntary surrender or an arrest. You have to imagine a voluntary surrender is how this is likely to proceed, but an arrest is typically what follows an indictment and then an arraignment. There are no special procedures under the law for a former president, but often accommodations are made. So we will see what all of those steps look like, but that's typically the sequence of events that follows an indictment.
So potentially we could see what's in this indictment within days here.
I think that's very possible, David.
All right, Kate Shaw with us here. Kate, thank you for helping us to navigate what is, as I mentioned, an historic moment. I want to bring in John Carl, who has covered Donald Trump, the former president, for many years. And John, Kate alluded to this, but we will see something we have never seen before, how it looks, how it unfolds. There are many questions still, how they'll bring the former president to New York, what that will look like, if we see much of it at all. But what's your understanding as to the possibilities of what the American public will see here as a former president is now indicted?
First, David, I think it's important to say that we are in entirely uncharted territory here. Not only is Donald Trump the first former president to face indictment, he is also currently the leading candidate for the Republican presidential nomination. And he is facing not just this indictment, but we know at least 3 other active criminal investigations, 2 of them federal investigations, one of them an investigation in Georgia. So he is facing further legal action as he is indicted here, and he has already made it clear that an indictment would not deter him from continuing to run for president. So this is something beyond anything that not only have we never seen anything like this in American history, it would have been hard to even imagine anything like this. In terms of what happens next, we know that the Secret Service has had conversations with law enforcement officials in New York about the logistics surrounding an appearance of Donald Trump before the court for an arraignment. He would need to come in for an arraignment. You need to go through booking and processing just like anybody else who would be facing criminal charges. Typically that includes basic things like fingerprinting and the taking of a mugshot. But as you can imagine, it would also necessitate massive security around that courthouse in Lower Manhattan, particularly because Donald Trump has repeatedly called his supporters to come out and protest this pending indictment. He predicted this indictment was coming. He had said it was going to come more than a week ago, and now it has come, and we will, of course, be watching very closely how Donald Trump communicates to his supporters and what kind of a reaction we'll see there. But yes, we expect this will be a voluntary appearance, that he would turn himself in, and that the handoff would be coordinated very closely with the Secret Service. He, of course, still has Secret Service protection as a former president.
The DA in this case, Mr. Bragg, obviously likely attempting to negotiate with the former president's team right now. John Carl talking about the possibility that they've been in touch with the Secret Service already to plan what could this look like potentially in the coming days as a former president would be brought to Manhattan. Obviously, they would try to come up with some sort of agreement. But John Carl, back to you on this. There's no